Hey violin students, Michael Sanchez, violin teacher here. I want to cover the most important things to consider with crossing violin strings. So a lot of you guys might be getting bow bounces when you're playing, something that looks like this. Unfortunate sounds that I'm sure you don't want to have. So yeah, I'm going to name the 5 things first and then actually talk about them. So the 5 tips I'm going to give you guys today are considering your elbow position, pulling the bow from the forearm, that's number 2, your wrist position when you're crossing strings, your index position, index finger in the bow hand, and then the last one is going to be your bow uses. So let's jump right in and give you guys some good tips. So yeah, as far as elbow position, so many students when they play the violin, they don't think enough about their right elbow, and I apologize for the screen being mirrored here. I noticed that with Facebook, but it's going to be your right elbow. It's so important to have that in the proper position. So when you're on the G string, you should be just above the instrument with your right elbow. When you're playing on the D string, it should be even with the instrument, your right elbow. And then on the A string, just below the instrument. And then on the E string, it should be right at your side. So many students, what they do is they don't pay enough attention to their right elbow, and they kind of cross strings more with their wrist, like this. And that causes a really tough time to get bow accuracy as far as clean notes, and then also it can really promote bow bouncing. So what I want you guys to do when you're playing is really pay attention more to your right elbow and exactly where it's at. Maybe record yourself, watch yourself in the mirror, but do whatever you can to really pay attention to the right elbow. The next thing I want to mention is just the importance of pulling the bow from the forearm. So many students, what they do is they use a lot of shoulder when they're playing the violin, a lot of right shoulder, instead of actually pulling the bow from the forearm. So a good analogy would be if you're going to punch somebody, which I hope you wouldn't do, you would do it sort of from your forearm, like this. We'll call it a quick jab. I guess technically if you really wanted to hit somebody, you would kind of use the shoulder, but let's say you're just doing a quick jab. Same kind of concept. When you're playing the violin, a lot of it is pulling more from the forearm instead of pulling from the shoulder. So a lot of you guys, what you guys are doing is not having good elbow position and pulling too much from the shoulder, and that causes bow bounce. Proper way is to make sure that you're in that proper plane with the elbow, and then once you get started with that bow stroke, start more from the forearm. Instead of... So one thing you can kind of notice is how much your right elbow actually moves when you're playing. So if you guys are noticing a lot of right elbow movement when you're playing, that is typically a promotion of you're using too much shoulder. So what you should see at the very beginning of the stroke is just a little bit of the elbow coming out, but then once it hits that point of coming out just a little bit, then it's all extension after that. So the 4 parts of the bow stroke: come out a little bit with your arm, get to the tip, not moving the elbow, bend the wrist coming back, and then bring the arm in a little bit. So a lot of you guys are probably, as you're getting towards the tip, really using that elbow too much instead of extending and using that forearm. Or number 3, wrist position. So a lot of you guys, when you guys are playing, you guys are not bending your wrist enough as you're coming up bow. So as you guys are going this way, which is up bow, there should be a lot more wrist action going on. So maybe record yourself playing or watch yourself in the mirror. A lot of you guys keep kind of a stiff wrist as you're coming. Sorry, phone there, somebody just called me. So you guys aren't bending your wrist as you're coming towards the frog. And what that does is that kind of causes the bow to be stiff, especially at the frog, instead of flexible. So it's really important to really bend that wrist. All right, number 4 is the index position. So a lot of you guys, what you guys are doing when you're playing the violin, you're not using enough of the front finger, the index finger, to kind of move the bow, to kind of pull it down or to push it back the other direction. So try to pay more attention to what you're doing here as far as stroking the bow. A lot of you guys are kind of pulling and pushing the bow too much with your forearm. You want to extend out with the forearm, but to actually guide the bow and kind of tell it what to do, when it comes to maybe playing softer, playing louder, a lot of that's coming from the index finger. So it's really important to kind of do what I call a conductor motion when you're playing. So a conductor motion with the index is basically that you're trying to push into the bow, the stick, and you're pulling and pushing at the same time, just like a conductor would do this. That's exactly what's happening in the index finger, what you're doing here. So a lot of you guys maybe that are struggling with various techniques, playing loud, moving the bow fast, crossing strings like we're talking about, are not using enough of the index finger. So I actually want to give you guys a quick drill to do. So I want you guys to set the bow on the strings, and I want you guys to take your right elbow, go all the way down to your side, and try not to make a sound as you're going across the strings like this. I call this the rocking bow drill. So if you're getting that kind of sound as you're doing that, you're probably using too much shoulder, you're not using enough index as you're crossing over the strings. And you guys are going to find it most challenging to do that at the tip. So if you're struggling to do this at the tip, if you're getting this, try to pay more attention to what you're doing with the index finger, because you're probably using too much arm to kind of rock the bow across the strings. So that's a really, really good drill that I highly recommend, and it really kind of exposes you to seeing if you're crossing strings properly. So yeah, index finger, really important. Good, last I want to talk about bow usage. So a lot of you guys are not using enough bow as you're playing the violin. So, you know, as I play a passage, let's just take minuet. A lot of you guys are playing it like this. So what I recommend is always using, sorry, I'm getting tons of calls. Use as much bow as possible by trying to get to the tip with each quarter note if you can. So it should be played more like this. Lots of calls. So it should be. And notice there as I'm on the D string, my elbow position is even with the instrument. I'm using as much bow as possible. I'm pulling the bow from the forearm. I'm using my index finger to really guide and push that bow to make it go faster. And then I'm using the whole bow. So those are all really important elements of playing the violin. And hopefully these are some really good tips for you this morning on Wednesday. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. If you have any questions about playing the violin, feel free to email me at michael@superiorviolins.com. Have a good day, guys.